Hey, if you're visiting, if you're looking for a church home, we hope you feel like you found it. Because I have been here a short enough time to know this is a wonderful group of people who will bless you. I'm working my way in here. I'm learning who these people are. And that stage of discovery is one maybe I share with you if you're looking for somewhere to be regularly. I can tell you this is a good group of people. That God is at work among these people, and that's really the more important thing, isn't it? So if you're looking for somewhere to visit, to worship regularly, I hope you feel like you found it. If you're not, if you're just coming through, just visiting the mountains, we hope you're blessed every time you come here. And we hope you'll come here again. But we do hope that your experience here is a blessed one. Because that's why we get together, right? Is to gather together to be in the presence of God and to experience the wonder of what God's doing among us as a people, as He's helping us to love each other and build us up. As I've said, if you're looking for a church home, this is a good one. This is a place where God is genuinely and actively at work. If you've got your Bibles this morning, open them or turn them on or whatever. I hope it comes up. Am I doing okay here? I'm probably on slide 25 by now. No, I am. Hang on. Nope, that's the songs. Here we go. We're getting there. There we go. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. That was, I want to begin by asking this somewhat awkwardly worded question, but just go with me with this. What is there about you that you know needs to change, but that is not changing, and you're okay with it not changing? Okay, sit with that for just a second. What is there about you that you know needs to change, and it's not changing, and you're all right with that? Now, as I ask that question, I do want to throw a couple of caveats at you. I'm not here talking about something that you cannot change. I'm not talking about a physical infirmity or a mental infirmity, something that you can't change, or something that really is in somebody else's power. You can't change someone else's heart. But so I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about what is there about you that you know ought to be different than it is. And you're just kind of waiting on the resurrection. Right? You're just sitting around knowing that in heaven you'll be different, but right here, people are going to deal with this. This is who I am, so I'm going to be. And I know this isn't in line with God, but is there anything like that in you? Maybe it's your temper. Maybe it's some appetite you don't want to control. Maybe it's some way of behaving when you're in a specific situation. You know it better than I do. What is there about you that needs to change? And it's not changing. And you're okay with that. Now, hear this before we go any further. I'm not suggesting you ought to change that yourself by yourself. This is a church, not a self-help group. And we don't proclaim a gospel of self-salvation. Okay? So rescue and salvation, not fixing yourself. You can't fix yourself. If you could fix yourself, then somebody explain the cross to me. I don't get it. And yet, there's something about this. God does not force transformation on us. It tends to be cooperative. So I ask this question, or perhaps I should ask Christ's question. Is it your desire to become whole. Some translations will translate this, do you want to be made well? And that's a fair translation of this, but I don't think it gets at everything that Jesus is doing. As he asks this question, I think he asks it of us. Do you want to become whole? Do you want to change? That place that you cannot change. Now, there are things about us that asking this question is silly, right? If you're a blind person and you say, if you just apply a little more willpower to your vision, that's going to get better. No, it's not. And there are things that we cannot, that this is irrelevant, that we just need to be fixed. We just need to be made whole. But there are things, apparently, that will not change until you deal with this question. There are things that won't be transformed, and I believe that's why Jesus asks it. The reason that he asks this question is because we tend to build these castles, protective walls around our hearts. Things that where you get to come this close and no closer. This is a castle somewhere in Scotland, I think. Beautiful place, isn't it? Surrounded by the ocean. It's a fortified place so they could protect against sea attacks. And that's why we build castles. We don't want the outside coming in. I don't want you to get any closer than this. And you're dealing with one of these things when you get real defensive if anybody asks you about it. Is that really who you want to be? Yes. Shut up. Leave me alone. Go away. I don't want. If that's where you are, you're dealing with one of those walls. But the thing about walls is they keep the outside out, but they also keep the inside in. This is a castle that I've been to. This is, in fact, my picture. I took this one. This is called Elmina Castle. It's on the coast of Ghana. It's one of the most evil places I've ever been. This is a slave castle. The purpose of this castle, it was built by the Dutch so that they could bring people from the African bush in here and put them in dungeons that are underneath that floor. You can't see them, but they're there in the darkest places I've ever been. And the people who are in this thing were, they think they're keeping the people who might try to rescue those people out. What they don't know is they are absolutely trapped in evil, doing the most horrible things. Human beings were never supposed to treat other human beings like this. And they're trapped in it. And they're stuck in it. And that's what our defenses become. Which is why Jesus asked the question, do you want to be made whole? Are you willing to let your defenses down? The man that we encounter this morning in the Scripture is one of the scariest men, I think, in the Scripture. Because when we see him, what we will see is a man who Jesus will ask this question. I don't think the man ever deals with it. I don't think he ever hears the question, really. All he hears it is as if the question is about his legs. And I think in a sense, Jesus is talking about his legs. I just think he's not just talking about his legs. He's talking about the kind of man he is. And he's going to ask this guy, do you want to be made whole? And the man is scary because of the possibilities it opens up for me. That I could sit face to face with Jesus himself and be unchanged. That I could come to this place year after year after year and remain stuck. Do you want to become whole? Because with some things, apparently that matters. We've got to be cooperative. And this guy shows us the disaster of what an uncooperative heart looks like. Let's get into this story. If you're with me in John chapter 5, this is beginning in verse 2. He says, now there is in Jerusalem a sheep gate, a pool, in Aramaic called Bethesda, which has 5 roofed colonnades. And in these lay a multitude of invalids, blind, lame, and paralyzed. So this is setting the scene for us. Now, if you got a King James Bible, you might have verse 4, right? But if you don't have King James, you probably don't have verse 4, because most of them say that's probably not in the original text. And what that is probably somebody reading this text going, why were they hanging out at a pool? There has to be something going on here. And so verse 4 says, every once in a while an angel would come down and stir up the water, and whoever got into the water first would get healed. That's probably not in John's original text, although it may explain what folks believed about this pool, whether it's real or not. Right? Whether that's actually what's going on. Might have been. I don't know. I was not ever there when this was going on. Right? But at any rate, you've got this collection of people who have gathered at this pool who believe it's got some sort of healing properties to it. Right? And then we meet our hero, or our anti-hero. There was a man who had been an invalid, who was there, who had been an invalid for 38 years. Now, why is he there? Well, based on the behavior that will follow, I think this guy is there because it gives him a really good excuse not to work on anything in his life. Not to try to develop or grow or change or anything. Because now that he's got himself there, he can say to the world around him, I've done everything I'm supposed to do. Now leave me alone. I can be right here. To put it into terms that we might experience, I'm going to church. Leave my temper alone. I'm going to church. So what if I'm driven by lust? I'm going to church. Who cares if I judge everybody and everything around me? I'm going to church, and it's okay that I'm a jerk. Have you ever met anybody who's been there for 38 years? And they are just as mean? You ever been there yourself? Remember, we didn't start this by asking about somebody else. What is there in you that's not changing? You're all right with that? I'm going to church. Leave me alone. I'll tell you, this sermon series is about encounters with Jesus, and Jesus has no intention of leaving you alone. He intends to rescue you. He wants to save you from being a broken person. He wants to make whole what's not whole now. He wants you to live a life that is sound. And that's why Jesus asks this guy this question. He says when Jesus saw him laying there, and he knew that he had already been there a long time, he said to him, do you want to be healed? I know you're sitting here, and it looks like you're taking care of your responsibilities, right? But do you have any interest in what this place is about? Are you really interested in being changed? Or do you just want, the excuse so that God will go, you did good enough. You earned your stamps. You get to get the rewards. What do you want? Do you want to be a different person? In my translation from the Greek is this question we've been dealing with here. And I'm no Greek expert, but this is one fair reading of this. Do you want to become whole? And healed is understood in that. But do you want to be whole, not just your body, but everything that you are? Do you want to become the kind of person you were meant to be? Do you want to be God's image on the earth? Because that's what you were made to be. Do you want that? The man's answer is so telling. He says, sir, I have no one to put me in the pool and the water stirred up, and while I'm going in, another steps down before me. Don't challenge me. The obvious answer is, well, yeah, why do you think I came here? That's the obvious answer that you give to, or maybe even, no, I got a good thing going. Do you know how much I earn begging? My legs are a gold mine. Leave me alone. Maybe that's the honest. I don't know. But he doesn't give any answer. His answer is, I can't do anything about it. Well, not on your own. But folks, if you are walking with God, you are not on your own. Ironic that I would use the word walking with a lame man. If you are living with God, if your life is in the presence of God, if your faith is in God, then you are not alone. When he says, I have no one, he is wrong. He has God with him. And if he wanted healing, who knows what God would have done? God might have sent like his son to him or something. If he just asked, which is what he did. But what this guy is showing us is his barriers. Do you see how defensive he is? Do you see how defensive he is? And when someone asks about your unwillingness to be like Christ, do you do that? Or when you hear something that challenges you, do you do that? Do you put up, no, not me, no. Leave me alone. I got no help. I can't change. This is just who I am. Leave me alone. But Jesus isn't going to leave him alone. Jesus said to him, get up, take up your bed, and walk. And at once the man was healed, and he took up his bed and walked. And incidentally, that's as much as we hear about his response to this. What? I mean, you would expect something like this, right? You know, you expect that the guy is going to be a little happy. When this exact same thing happens in Acts chapter 3, the guy goes running and jumping and praising God. So you expect something like this, right? Or at least like this, you know? But the guy gives us this. I can barely contain my overwhelming joy. I'm so very excited about what has happened to me. Are you kidding me? 38 years you've been lame. 38 years you've dealt with this. You've even given up. You've decided you can't possibly be any better. And suddenly it's changed. And this is all you can do? Although, before we're too critical of him, have you ever experienced liberation from some sin that has plagued you and didn't say thanks at all? Have you ever found, you 6 months later, you reflect back over your time and go, wow, I haven't done that in 6 months. That's always been a problem. Sometimes I think we just, even though we have eyes, we are blind. This guy clearly is. But I'm going to suggest to you that he's not whole yet. That his legs are whole, that his body is whole. But he's exactly the same. And I say that because of what happens next. And this is the only response we get. But what happens next is, now that day was a Sabbath. So the Jews said to the man who had been healed, it's the Sabbath and it's not lawful for you to take up your bed and walk. Incidentally, Jesus could have done this at any time. This is the main reason Jesus healed this guy. He intends to confront those Pharisees too. Well, we're not going to get into that today. But he could have done it any day of the week. Could have done it on Monday. Didn't. Chose to do it on Sabbath. Because he's going to provoke those Pharisees. Maybe we'll get into that another time. But today I just want to look at this guy and look at what he says. But the man said to him, the man who healed me, that man, said to me, take up your mat and walk. Not my sin. Not my fault. It's that other guy. It's not my fault. I can't help but be this way. Do you note how similar that is to what he said to Jesus when Jesus asked him if he wanted to get well? It's not my fault. There's nobody here. No one will help me. Other people always take what should be mine. It's not my fault. Not my fault. This is that guy's castle. He is protecting that unchanging part of himself because he has no interest in it changing. Not really. He doesn't want to be any different because to be different, to want to be different so often costs us something. We have to admit there's something wrong with us. We have to come to terms with it isn't someone else's fault, it's me. I'm the one broken this way. It isn't that she's irritating, it's that I'm grumpy. It isn't that he is a liar. It's that I push on people. It isn't that I lose my temper. Me. I'm the one who acts lustfully. Me. And we don't want to do any of that. It's so much easier to stay safely behind our walls and blame everybody else, which is why Jesus asks, is it your desire to become whole? Because it does cost us something. That's why Jesus says, take up your cross and follow me. That's why He calls it death. It does cost us something, but we gain something for the cost. Are you willing to pay it? Are you willing to be different? Jesus is going to provoke this man again. They're going to say, well, who was it who said that to you? And he doesn't know, because Jesus has faded into the background. So Jesus actually is going to come to the guy and give him, I think, one last chance. You got a chance to be different. When he says, see, you are well, the word he uses is that word whole. See, your body's whole. You've been made well. But now, sin no more, that nothing worse may happen to you. Saying, change this part of you that's not whole. Now, what is his sin? It's his hostility to Jesus. It's his hostility to God. It's his blaming everybody but himself. There's his brokenness. And I say that because of what he does next. That man went away and told the Jews that it was Jesus who had healed him. Now let that sit on you for a second. He did what? Are you kidding me? Yes, he did. That man went away and told the Jews that it was Jesus who had healed him, and they start persecuting Jesus. They start attacking Jesus. Do you see the nature of that man's heart? Do you see where he is? He is unchanged. Which is why this guy is so scary. Because he is in a prison that he thinks is a castle. He thinks he's safe, and he's not. And we sit there with our protection around our anger or our deceptiveness or our hatred. And we put those walls, and it's so safe, and it's keeping God out, and it's keeping us locked in. And we are trapped in dungeons of despair. And so he has this encounter with Jesus, this guy does. But, and look, he has been changed by the encounter. That's what's so scary about it. Because it's not like I can say, one of the dangers we face is I can point to places where I am different and say, look, I'm fine, now leave me alone. And just ignore the things I'm neglecting. Well, no, a change in heart, a change in my life does not necessarily mean I'm done. This guy has had a real encounter with Jesus. He is really changed by the encounter. He walked away from it. Couldn't do that morning, that afternoon. He can walk around. He has not become better. At the place where he's not whole, he isn't any better, and in fact, he is worse. Have you ever seen that in Christian faith? A person who becomes more bitter, or more judgmental, or more hateful, or more lustful. Have you ever experienced the trouble rising up? You know, I think honestly sometimes God brings our sin in front of us. As in the Gospel of John, as the one person who stands there as a warning post. Don't be like this. This ought to shake us a little bit and cause us to look in and say, what is there in me, God, that you and I need to work on? If you're breathing, your discipleship is not done. You still have work to do. You still have service to the world. You still have service to God. And you still have work to do within. There is always work and change that can be done. And so I ask what I asked at the very beginning of this sermon. What is there about you that you know needs to change? But it's not changing. And you're okay with it not changing. I hope that this sermon this morning, this encounter with the Christ, makes us less okay. But I also want to end with this question, the question of the Christ. Do you desire to become whole? Because you cannot fix yourself. And again, if you can fix yourself, someone explain the cross. If you can fix yourself, then why was the Spirit poured out? Why was it ever given? It takes the work of God together with us. But apparently He wants cooperation from His people. And He asks you, do you even want that to change? Are you even paying attention to it? Because if you're not, the Christ is calling to you. And if you ignore Jesus, look at where it got that guy. That's not a place you want to be. That's not where you want to go. So hear the gospel this morning. The Christ can make you different. You can change. And it is by His power and the work of God among His saints that you can be transformed. The question is not asked to say, do you want to be whole? Well, good luck with that. The question is, do you want to be whole? Because Christ will say, I can make you whole. And if you're interested, come to Him. Let Him change you from the inside out. It may be this morning that you have not really begun your walk together with Christ. He's calling to you. He wants you for Himself. There's water right here. And you can join together with Christ in His death and His rising again in the waters of baptism. And if you want that, we want it for you, and so does Christ. And maybe you've already done this. In this morning's sermon, you've been looking into yourself while I've been up here rambling. And if you see something that you know, you've heard other people, you know you need the community's prayer. You need to make confession to the community and apologize. If that's where you are this morning, don't ignore the work of God going on in you right now. It may be also that you came into this place carrying a burden and you want the prayers of the saints. Don't walk away from here carrying that burden alone. If this morning you're subject to the invitation of God, there's room for you right here. Why don't you come right now while we stand and sing?